What's up, guys? Hey,
Oh,
Bill.
man.
Hey, guys. Good to see you.
Bill Queale, welcome.
It's been a while.
It's been a minute,
man.
right? So just because nobody knows who we are, but Bill, you and I and Tom actually go back at this point like longer than I'd like to admit.
A few years at least, yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome. We talk about shift quite a bit on this show, just because we actually have a lot of people that have been influential in our journey and that we all met at the same place. So it's awesome to have another shift person up here chatting it up with us, especially one who's got as much to say about the stuff we talk about as we do.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, Bill, I think it was Eliza that pushed us to record this. So, yeah.
It probably was. It certainly could have been, that's for sure.
She was like, you guys talk about a lot of weird shit, and I just wish I could listen to it with like Google browser open next to me so I could actually look up half this crap. And so the show was born. But yeah, thanks for coming. We got so much we could cover. So I will at some point just cut us off. Otherwise, we'll be here till Tuesday. So
yeah.
I'd be right there with you with no sleep, and we just roll.
But that's the thing, right? When you're passionate about it, it just kind of flies, you know?
So before we get into sort of nerding out on stuff, I don't even know if I know this story, but like, how did we get here? How did Bill come to be as Bill is now?
Your origin story, man.
Yeah,
man. So you want the professional or personal version, right?
I listen. Dealer's choice. Yeah,
you can walk between them. I don't care.
Yeah. So on the professional side, so I'm an internal medicine physician. I'm in private practice. I've been a primary care doctor for 25 years, I guess now. Prior to medical school, I had a career in physical therapy, and I got a master's in exercise science. So my whole passion, really, for as long as I can remember, but certainly professionally, was in human performance, health. How do people navigate their environment? How do we keep people functioning at a high level without having them get, sick or injured, basically? So it's pushing people to their limits. Trying to minimize that risk of injury, illness. Then, of course, if they do get sick or injured, we're going to be there to, pick them up and get them back on track. So that was, that's why I got into physical therapy. Now, as I was in that career, I was kind of digging into more basic science, kind of got the bug to go to medical school, decided to do that. Came to Hopkins here in Baltimore, and, it was great. It was 10 years of medical training. I didn't learn anything about like exercise, nutrition, sleep, any of that stuff, right? I learned was how to prescribe drugs, right? That's all I learned. So, but it was amazing. It was amazing training. Medical school, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of internal medicine residency, where I learned a lot about disease, human disease, which I really don't like human disease. I live to prevent it, but I learned a lot about it. And then I did a fellowship in general medicine, really focused again on sports medicine, high-performing individuals, and kind of brought the whole thing back full circle. When I finished, I thought I was going to have an academic career at Hopkins, and as much as I love Hopkins, I probably would have been too constrained there. So I went out into private practice and hung out a shingle, really, and put my brand out there, which is kind of sports medicine, internal medicine, but all primary care, right? I mean, primary care is my passion. I like being that point of contact for my patients. You have anything, whether it's a hangnail or you're going off the rails, call me, right? I mean, that's what primary care should be. So I pretty much just made a career out of that brand, and it's been awesome, right? The one I think interesting thing to that was that early on I found out that insurance doesn't pay for good primary care. So about 20 years ago, I converted to what people call concierge model. And there's a lot of opinions about it, but at the end of the day, I get to spend time with my patients. I dig into people's lives. We build trust, compassion as part of the model. That's the short version of what I've been doing for the last.
And I'm jumping out of my skin on like about 87 things you just said because like I again, it's been a minute since you and I spoke, but I kind of had a come to Jesus with my doctor, and it didn't end well. We did not see eye to eye, and I moved on from him, but he was like the third one I had moved on from. And it's just perennially disappointing to me that everything you just said is totally true, not because you haven't made a great career out of it, but because it doesn't exist unless you take a Herculean involvement in your own health to do it. And that is sort of the opposite of the advertising message of health in America right now, right? It's like, oh, we've got all this great doctors, just get a primary care physician, you'll be fine, right? And like, even at surface level, that's so far from the truth. It's nauseating, right? And it's frustrating beyond belief how hard it is to do some basic shit.
And that should be, well, it is my job, right? That's what I do, is to help you do the shit you don't want to do. I also try to keep you from doing the shit you shouldn't do, right?
Yeah.
And we call that behavioral health, which is, a story of my life, right? I mean, I tend to do things I shouldn't do, tend to not do things I should do. And, as a result, bad things happen. I learned that lesson. There's another part of my story that I don't mind throwing it out there, because it is chapter 1 of my book, and that I'm a proud recovering drug addict. And I will tell you that I probably have learned more about human nature, human suffering, and human health, and this kind of idea of recovery or rebuilding your life after deep trauma from my experience, like 20 years in recovery. So when I say, I'm pretty good at doing things I shouldn't do, and I'm not good at doing things I shouldn't do, my recovery programs taught me is kind of exactly the opposite. I mean, but the point of it is, like, I actually have to willfully practice. Like, I have to be very intentional with kind of doing things I don't want to do. I mean, I got this great gym here in my basement, but I'll tell you, I got to drag my ass down here a lot.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to.
But isn't that the way it is, though, for almost everybody? I feel like, people even when they want to make changes, breaking those patterns, breaking those habits, setting up those new paradigms, it can be super difficult. And we always get in our own way.
It can be nearly impossible.
Yeah.
So was your drug journey pre or post medical training?
Intra. Right?
Intra. Gotcha. Okay.
So I never had any experience with drugs. It wasn't part of my culture. It wasn't part of my bringing. I mean, drank in college like anybody else, had a good time. But
you drank in college? I didn't. I studied it. No, I'm kidding.
Well, yeah, I was in the library every day, all day.
Yeah.
I went to the University of Delaware. It was a big party school. We had a good time. Well, the cool thing about physical therapy at the time, it wasn't as rigorous as it is now. And part of the appeal was there was like 98% women, and it wasn't so rigorous. I'm like, I could not really work that hard and get B's. That was fun. I was a B student. Like, give me a 3.0, I'm good. Yeah. That was great until I wanted to go to medical school, and I'm like, oh shit, like 3.0 kind of sucks.
Right. So, you're failing at 3.0.
Yeah. I had to overcome that barrier. But when I was in graduate school after college, getting my exercise science degree, working as a PT, started taking some higher level courses. I kind of got my shit together, honestly, and did pretty well. And that was part of the motivation to go to medical school. All these basic science classes, organic chemistry and biochemistry, microbiology stuff that I like nerding out on, still do. But what's interesting is during those 3 years, and this was 22 to 25 years old, I was killing it, man. I was like, I was working out. I was a bartender. I just had a great crowd. I think life was good. So I would say I came to medical school at 25 years old to Baltimore, like in peak health, top of my game. And honestly, 10 years later, I had a gun to my head. I wanted to take my own life.
Wow.
And that
quite a turnaround in 10 years.
Yeah,
huh?
No, it was spectacular personal failure. The fact that I was able to maintain any kind of professional success, I don't know what that's a tribute to. Perseverance, maybe, but or good at putting masks on, maybe, I don't know. But what happened with the drug as part of that, the journey, and this is very relevant, I think, to the conversation that we need to be having. When I went to medical school, I was a little bit of a fish out of water. I'm at Hopkins. I mean, it's like 4 O's from Ivy League schools. It was, I could hold my own, but I worked hard, studied hard. But what happened? Sleep went out the window, right? Sure. I'm like, I was sleeping. Like, who needs to sleep? I don't have time to sleep. Stopped working out like I did. Wasn't eating well. It was just very hard, right? So my lifestyle choices got worse. And then, I got involved in a relationship. Ultimately got married early, like second, third year medical school. Had my first child, little girl, at my third year medical school. So it's just
all concurrently that's so much, man.
Oh, good.
You're like, just stack it on, dude. I got it.
Stack it on. Bring it on. But that was my mindset at that time. Like, bring it on. I got this. And, lots of amazing good things in there, particularly being a father. One of the best advice I got was, be the best doctor a father can be, right? Be, father first.
No, that's fine.
It was awesome, right? I had this little girl, she's in third year medical school. And then, I think residency was like the beginning of the end, or the potential end. It was just a lot. You're working 100, 120, 130 hours a week, right? Massive amounts of pressure, no sleep. I had my little boy at the time. So, marriage, it's hard enough already on top of those work hours. So I didn't know it was wrong. I had all kinds of symptoms, right? And this is functional medicine type stuff we can talk about. Gut pain, right? Never had an iron stomach, right? All of a sudden I'm having like stomach aches and nauseous. I got this terrible lightheadedness. I was almost like fainting. The fatigue was just nearly incapacitating. Like, talk about, fatigue, but like incapacitating, like catatonic. Like, I can't barely function. And anxious, depressed. So anyway, I went to all these doctors. Nobody knew what the hell was wrong with me. Regular doctor, a good doctor. I'm at Hopkins, right?
Right.
And, finally,
you get your pick of the litter, really. I mean, at a place like that, right?
And people too. It's like the who's who there. Yeah.
Yeah, and they can figure cardiologists and gastroenterologists, orthopedics, the whole 9 yards. So anyways, like, we can't figure out, it must be in your head. You got to go see psychiatry or see a psychiatrist. And that was fine. Like, I had no problem with that. I had a great psychiatrist, worked through a bunch of stuff. But the model, even in psychiatry, and I had a great therapist. She was really, really good. But the model is drugs, right? Prescribed medications. Mm-hmm. So I was thrown on every diagnosis, every medication under the sun, most of which made my problems worse until she prescribed a drug called Riddled, right? So Riddled's a drug used mostly for kids with ADHD. And but it's a stimulant, man, speed. So I'm like,
yeah, we used to snort lines of that in art school when I was in college.
Right? Yes.
Like,
that might be the most art school sounding statement I've ever heard. Too.
Right.
I'm like literally, it was sort of like, who's got a Ritalin, and it was just it was so normalized. We weren't doctors, obviously, but, back in the day, you had to go to Kinko's at 2 a.m. to print out a poster, but it's a 50 gigabyte like poster. So it took like 6 hours to print, and you had to stand next to it because if anything went wrong, so you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs at 3, 4, 5, 6 a.m. And I'm like, well, eventually that runs dry and you just have to figure out how to get some help with it. And you're like, oh, there's this little yellow pill. These things are fucking amazing.
It's amazing.
Like, these things are great.
And that's the problem, right? It's like, I did like, oh my God, I can work 18, 20, 26 hours straight. Like, I don't need any sleep. This is the greatest drug ever invented. And until it stopped working and I had to come off, I tried to get off of it. And then you go through withdrawal depression, and that was horrible. So, listen, everything came to a crashing halt right after I finished my 10 years of training. My marriage was falling apart. I was falling apart. It was just terrible. Ended up going to rehab, and it was amazing experience. Introduced me to kind of a process of recovering from not just because I thought it was about the drugs. Mate, I'm like, oh, listen, if I could just get off this Riddle, and I'll be good. And then you realize, like, it's actually not the drug. It's me. Like, my problem. So anyway, so that was so it's been a climb back from that. But listen, it's made me a better doctor, made me a better father, husband. All of those types of experiences have been helpful. But back to your point, Tom, it's like, how do you change behavior? Changing behavior is fucking hard. Like, it is really, really difficult to break patterns, and particularly if you have any amount of discomfort, which a lot of us do, physically, mentally, emotionally. If you give me a choice of anything that's going to alleviate that discomfort at the moment, I'm taking it. It could be it could be a line of Ritalin, it could be a drink, a shot, it could be any of that kind of stuff, right? I'm going to jump on it. So, so how do you, again, kind of not do the things that you shouldn't do? And I come back. I think that should be our role in primary care. We should help people navigate that process.
Yeah. It's so funny because Matt and I, was it yesterday? We were talking about like this search for comfort. I know we had another guest on who's actually an acupuncturist in the UK, and he made a what did he call it? A resonance kind of vagal nerve device. And he's like, look, humans will find comfort wherever they can, and they don't ever want to do the thing that's difficult or lean into that. And, I think that's where we really grow, is when we can kind of evolve to, not necessarily be happy about it, but deal with it and process it in a healthy way.
And Bill, he actually said another thing that's been like boggling my mind since. He's like, you can think about this. You could never have too much comfort. And I was like, fuck. You're like, that's absolutely fucking accurate. Like, he's like,
when my brain works, more is always better. In addiction, more is always better.
More is always better. Yeah.
Yeah. More of all this stuff is always better.
And I think, listen, and it's funny, I'm in this weird sort of transition period in my house because I've got, later teenage boy, which has an energy unique to that, right? And I've got a newly teenaged girl, and there's a whole different thing going on there. But I run a cannabis accessory company. I do a podcast on like putting red lights on your dick, and like all kinds of weird shit's happening in my life that I can't really hide from my kids. So I kind of am like, all right, let's let this leash out a little bit at a time, because I don't want to give them the fire hose information, but like, I'm like, yep, I love cigarettes. In fact, I would be chain smoking them if I didn't absolutely know it was going to kill me. And I tell people this all the time. I'm like, listen, I fucking love cigarettes. Like quitting cigarettes was the weirdest thing I had to go to a hypnotist 3 times to get it to work, because I'm like, I just have to stop, but I don't want to. I literally would have one in each finger all day if I could. And my kids are like laughing at it. I'm like, but here's the thing. You can't. Like you just can't. Like it's not that it's not attractive, trust me. And if you came home smoking, I would murder you. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't not understand.
Anyway, right? I remember, like an active addiction, particularly towards the end, we call it, using against your will. I mean, there was like many times that I would be sit there, like in a bathroom by myself, doing riddle and thinking to myself, I hate this. Like,
yeah.
I don't
even want to do this.
Horrible. I don't even want to do it anymore. It's like barely even working. But you kind of can't not do it. You get stuck in this pattern that is just it's insane. But listen, you apply that out to society. Listen, everybody's addicted to carbohydrates and sex, right? I mean, we would not have survived as a species if we couldn't, reproduce. And carbohydrates is, and the ability to convert carbohydrates to fat is what saved our ass as a species, a long time ago. When you look at everybody struggles, you don't have to be in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous like me to be a struggling human being. And what is cool about my experience is I am able to see people for who they are. They're human. Like everybody's human. I don't care what they are saying or what they're thinking. Like, hey man, like you're broken. You have unhealed trauma inside you. Everybody does. Mm-hmm. So to be able to, what I try to do in my kind of brand of primary care is to allow that into the conversation. Now I have time. This is where time becomes so precious. It's critical. And this is what is so bad about the current system is you have like
the 8-minute intake. Yeah.
You get 10 minutes with the patient. That's bullshit. You can't do anything in 10. I'm barely getting started in 10 minutes. I'll spend 2-3 hours with a new patient to just kind of really understand, again, the context in which they live their life, what got them to be who they are today, what are the barriers to them moving forward. If I can't get that information, I'm not doing my job.
And that last blow up I told you with my last doctor was around my physical. We were at the like 10, 11, 12 minute mark, and he's shuffling me out of the room. And out of this machine spits out like 50 little receipts. They're about 6 inches wide. And it's like, well, your BMI is crazy. You need to lose weight. And, and I was like, well, but my BMI is crazy because you weighed me with a fucking leather jacket and Timberlands on, like on the way in the door. Yeah, I mean, there's probably 10 pounds of fucking clothing on my body. Like, how do we even know what we're looking at here? And he's like kind of looking at me like, bro, I got 50 other things to do. Please just stop talking. Like, I mean, it wasn't even like I'm mad at you. It was just this dejection look on his face. Like, dude, I don't.
One of the arguments, and I make this argument in my book, is that because as a doctor, prior to, this new practice model, I was, I know what it's like to run ragged, 15-minute visits where you only got 10 minutes to spend with somebody. And that, I was actually a fellow working at Hopkins, and that's a hospital-based model. That's the model that hospitals and large organizations use. And it's all about the coding game, right? It's all about getting a billing code. I'm kind of laughing at the leather jacket. Like they don't, I can't say that they do this on purpose, except that like they need you to be overweight or obese, because if you're healthy, they can't bill for anything. You can't bill for healthy people. You have
There's no well care.
You need to have a disease that has a code that you can then attach to a billing code so that you can get paid. And that's my biggest problem with this whole industry, the whole medical industry. It's geared towards sick care. It's a $4.5 trillion sick care system that if you don't have a disease, they can't get paid. So, when I wrote my book, I had to kind of address this issue, and I had to man, is it designed this way? Because you got to ask yourself the question. All right, so you have this $400 billion pharmaceutical industry on top of a multi-billion-dollar food industry. Okay, the food industry is making addictive foods that cause disease that are solved by drug companies prescribing drugs. And my job is basically be a pawn for the drug companies to basically put you on drugs.
Keep that cycle going.
And there's a sense of that. And I don't think it was never designed that way. I really do think it evolved over the last 100 years. And when you put the story together, it actually makes sense. But the problem is it's not working anymore. That model is broken. It's antiquated. It's obsolete. It might have worked well 100 years ago. Okay. And I think actually it did. Insurance-based acute care, hospital-based medicine. I think it was great because most people 100 years ago, they're running around, they're working. We didn't have the foods we had now. We didn't have all the environmental toxins we had now. People weren't sitting like they do now. People were generally thin, and they would get either injured on the job or get like a pneumonia. And it was perfect. But then, fast forward 100 years later, we have all this chronic disease. We have all this obesity-related disease and heart disease and diabetes and cancer and dementia. And it's that model is not working for the problems that we have today. So we need a new model. And that's kind of my argument.
Yeah. And I think that the bigger problem and we see this in everything, not just health, but I think it's most pronounced in health, is that when you get to a spot where business analysts start getting involved and start honing the edge, as it were, on a system, right? And some of it makes sense. Some of it makes less sense. But the more you sort of divide and conquer those roles and responsibilities, the more detached different people get from the other pieces of the system, right? And so when I see it now, you're absolutely right. Like now the billing guy is like, okay, well, insurance can't just write blank checks to people. Like there has to be a limit on there. So how do you put that limit? Well, the insurance guys have their way of doing it, right? And then that filters down to the doctors who now have to play this tomfuckery game of like, all right, well, like,
so stupid,
but that didn't evolve overnight. And you're right, it is broken. But like the problem, I guess, is that, and where I was going with this was that as a system, it's such an integral part of our society at this point that like, it's not just a function of changing the system. It would be a function of, dare I say, an anthropological change at this point. Like we have to change it like across the board, which is a lot different.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you this, even the other day, we had a patient get her treatments denied. And it was a company that we never have a problem with. And when we looked into it, they said, oh, she can't have a chronic condition. Like, wait, I can't treat a chronic condition. No, you're acute care. Well, this is the first time I'm hearing that.
What?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's great. And the rules change too, right? They always keep changing the rules. I mean, how many times I go through a prior authorization to try to get a test covered or even a medication prescribed, like it's just jumping through hoops. And I said, well, wait a minute, you denied it last time based on that. Now I'm doing what you said, and you deny it for some other reason. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Matt, you bring up a good point. Is that we have a healthcare system, but the reality is that's just one of many systems in our society at large, and that's I think you're putting your finger on something that is a direction that we need to go. And there are some interesting people around the world that are looking at it this way. We call it systems thinking, that are looking at all these as complex systems. And you're right, the healthcare system, you almost can't treat the healthcare system independently, right? It's so tied to education, criminal justice system, political, economic systems. So they're all fully kind of integrated. I think there's something unique about the healthcare system because it has to do with the health of the human beings, which comprise all the other systems. So if you're looking for kind of hubs in the system or a place to start, getting human beings healthy and reducing the burden of chronic disease is a good place to start, because when you're healthy and productive, you can make better decisions, think more clearly, and I think we'll have a better chance of solving some of the other problems. But you're right; it's all connected, man. Like
that is the most radical statement I think we've had said on the show, and yeah, of course everybody should be healthy, but no, if you get people healthy and they're making better choices, functionally all the systems will kind of like fall apart if they're not being run the way they were.
Well, Bill, you put it perfectly. I've never heard anyone say it this way, but you're like, all these systems are made up of humans. If you don't have functioning humans, then these systems are fucking useless. Like they're not like really, but you know what? I mean, and Tom's going to like roll his eyes because I keep mentioning these because it's two things in my life right now that are driving me insane. But like I have a semi-concierge doctor now who's like sort of halfway between like a regular doctor and you, right? Like, so he's in the middle. And I get a phone book size blood panel back, which is great. My physical was 4 hours. It was awesome. Like, I mean, I'm like, so far, so good, right? But I get to this one stat, this lipo-A thing, and he's like, it's massive. It's like 191, right? So, and he goes, you can't exercise out of this. It's a genetic thing. You're not going to diet your way down. He goes, I want to put you on a statin. And I said, okay, well, I don't want to go on a statin. So let's keep keep looking. So we randomly have another doctor on the show. We're talking about it. The same topic came up, which is why I was like, Tom's going to roll his eyes because it's been not the first time we've talked about this, but he goes, oh, go get an CT angiogram. And like, cause I had a calcium cardiac test, which by the way was out of pocket because, my doctor prescribed it, but like, I'm not operating like in the system as it were. I'm kind of like system adjacent with like one foot.
He didn't have something scary enough in another area.
Yeah. Right. So I got a 0 on my calcium score, which is great. But the doctor's like, hey, listen, if I had that, I'd be running down to the store right now and grabbing me a CT with angiogram. So I called my doctor. He said, okay, well, that would be the soft plaque version, which would come next. He goes, but they're never going to approve it. I was like, well, let's give it a shot. Right. So I get an email back or a letter in the mail a couple weeks ago. And I ended up calling the insurance company and I said, it was denied. Can you walk me through? Because it's like 8 pages of denial in legalese. And I'm like, can you just tell me why? And they said, because you don't have coronary artery disease. I said, but this is a test to tell me where I'm at in coronary artery disease progression. And if I am on a progressive path, I need to stop it now. And she's like, she kind of snickers and then she's like, I think she's like, this is being recorded. I can't actually laugh at this, but,
how I really feel.
Yeah. But like the snicker told me what I needed to know, which was she understood what I was saying. I said, so let me just repeat for you what I heard. I want to make sure I heard this right. You're telling me that I can get a test to help me solve a problem only after I've gotten the problem. I can't get a test, which by the way is $850 here in Baltimore at the local CT place. And I was like, okay, so for $850, I could out of pocket find out where I'm at on there. I don't really want to spend $850 on this because it's a lot of money. And, I think there's a reasonable chance that it's not going to be bad news, but knowing that I can get it and know for sure, but I'm being thwarted by an $850 test. And I told the woman, I said, for $850, if I find out I have it, isn't this going to be a hell of a lot cheaper? Like than
down the
treating
road,
me
the cardiovascular disease.
Yeah. And that's what I don't. So even Bill, even when you tell us like the system's fucked up, it doesn't make sense even at a clarity of thought level. And the other one was this Queale test, right? This liquid biopsy,
the
right?
Other one, yeah.
It tests for 57 cancers. And okay, great. If it tells me about pancreatic cancer, like pre-stage 1, when it's just sort of getting its shit together and isn't that a better, cheaper way of treating my pancreatic cancer than if it's at stage 4 and I'm like in for a bazillion dollars? Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
Unless you look at it through the lens of a sick care system that makes money off of you having disease. There's just no financial incentive to pay for prevention. And it's not that doctors don't like it. And you ask anybody with any common sense, what makes more sense? Should I, get a CT angiogram to show that you actually have soft plaque, which is, potentially going to cost you a lot of money down the road? Or do you just want to, or do you want to pay for it now because we can treat that and then you're never going to have a problem? And the incentives just aren't aligned that way, which is why I think we really need to flip this thing on its head.
Mm-hmm.
We need to reverse the incentives as a whole. Well, actually, I should be careful I say this because I'm not like anti-sick care, right? I mean, God forbid if I or my wife.
Well, you need the sick care too.
Yeah, like
but the goal is to keep people from getting down that. But
listen, 4.7% of 2022 healthcare expenditures went to primary care, which means over 95% goes to sick care. Like, can we just even that out a little bit? Most other countries, you look at 10% oriented toward primary care and prevention, maybe 20%. If you do that, by the way, guess what happens? Like that 4 trillion will come down. And you see this in self-insured corporations, right, that actually invest proactively in primary care and prevention. Yeah. That there's a return on investment. Actually, there's a couple of stories I told in my book about this. One where we had a company in Texas, and it was an occupational health program, but we actually did primary care. We didn't just deal with injuries and illnesses when they happen. We put together on-site primary care where we really focused on not just workplace injury prevention. That was part of it. So we actually got people healthier because guess what the best way to prevent workplace injuries is?
Yeah.
Keep people healthy. Yeah.
Improve functional capacity, improve mitochondrial density, right? Reduce your fatigue associated with actual manual labor. And you do all those things and everybody does better. Oh, by the way, performance and productivity goes up too. So you actually make more shit because people are working harder. And the downstream benefits are like inarguable. And it does make you ask the question, somebody like me, I've been doing this for 20 years, like, why doesn't anybody want to pay for primary care? I think it's such a cultural shift, and at a $4.5 trillion industry, it is a massive barge. It's just going to take a long time to turn around. I do think it's changing. There's a term called value-based care, which is a different way of compensating doctors. You're starting to see some uptick in this. But I'll tell you what, even in value-based care, okay, if a hospital or health system embraces this, the answer is primary care. I mean, the answer to value-based care is primary care because we're the ones who bring value to the system. We're the ones who focus on prevention, improving health, improving performance, catching diseases early with like liquid biopsies, treating them early, right? It's easier to put out a campfire than the forest fire. I've always said before, our system now is like calling the fire department after the house is already burned to the ground.
Sure.
It's ridiculous, right? There is so much we can do, even just now. Now, we can talk about what the future holds. That's fascinating with genomics and metabolomics and wearables, devices.
Yeah, man. Yeah. We've got it. We've got all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming down the pike. But right now, I just say, listen, pay for primary care. You're going to save money. Period. End of story. And about 3-to-1 ROI on that, by the way. But
answer me this though. I mean, you're not wrong. We don't have a financial incentive, but the problem that I was describing is not. If I'm Lilly, I understand why we don't want Matt Hampton getting a free angiogram or a free, Grail test. I get that. But we're not talking about Lilly. We're talking about the insurance company who actually has to cut the check. And so you would think that they would be like, philosophically anyway, you'd think that the insurance company would be the great equalizer, right? Like, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. Like, yes, you would make more money if this guy gets sick, but we got to pay for it. So we don't want to do that. Like, but it doesn't end up working out like that. And that's the part that confuses me.
Yeah. And so this is what happens when insurance companies make medical decisions. They make stupid decisions. That's not what they do. Okay. What I say is finance a primary care system and let you and I make decisions. Okay. You and I can make a good decision. And maybe you have a little bit of skin in the game, or maybe they say, you got to pay for 10%. Okay, so it's going to cost you $80. There's a rationale to that because it creates the conversation between you and I, where I actually can sit there and say, because there are times I might say, Matt, dude, I am not worried about. I don't think you need a CT angiogram. Like I'm comfortable. And but my friend, I'm like, no, man, like it's going to cost you $100 because you got a 10% co-insurance or whatever the plan is.
Sure.
My point is, I'll give you an example. I had somebody who came to me with a headache, right? And she said, I need an MRI. I said, why do you need an MRI? Well, I got this headache. Okay, so we talked a little bit about it, and it turned out her friend had a brain tumor, right? So
yeah,
that's what everybody thought. I'm like, That happens to me too. I'm not immune to this, right? You know, my friend has a disease. I have the same symptoms. That must mean I have disease. I'm going to die.
Correct.
I need proof that I'm not going to die. She had a health plan. It was like a $5,000 deductible. MRI was going to be like $1,800 or some crazy number. And I went through, we talked, you know, I went through, took a good history, listening to family history, genetics, all of these things, went through a good detailed physical exam. I was just not worried about this. And I told her, I said, listen, I totally get it. And I want you to feel comfortable. I don't think you have a brain tumor. I said, but I'll tell you what, I can get this answer with a CAT scan. I don't need an MRI to answer this question. A CAT scan is going to be like $160. That's why we just start there. It's quick and easy. You don't have to suffer like being in a coffin with a little tube for 45 minutes.
Sure.
And it was perfectly normal. And, you know, the headache went away. It actually was a neck issue. I should have sent it to you, Tom. You know, it was fine. So, but the point of that is the fact that she had a high deductible, and I was thinking, like, I don't think you need to spend money on that. Let me help you make good decisions with your money. So yeah, the insurance companies just have stupid policies and they don't make sense because I've seen them pay for shit that they shouldn't pay for. I mean, about wasted
absolutely.
money. Holy shit. They spend money on stuff that is, wasteful. There's about a third of the money we spend is wasteful. So it works both ways. But guess what? You and me can make good decisions together. Just create some financial system where you and I can make good decisions.
You know, Bill, to speak to that, even in the littlest, stupidest ways, I remember my uncle was diabetic, right? Insulin dependent. And he goes, hey, do you need any of these syringes? Do you need any of these alcohol swabs? Do you need any of these lancets? And I go, what do you mean? Don't you need them? He goes, well, I give myself an injection once a day. They send me 400 syringes a month. Yeah. And he had like cases of alcohol swabs. And he's like, you know, I check my blood 2-3 times a day. They send me 1,000 lancets a month.
Wow.
And it's
listen, and here's the reason there's so
and these are little, like, this is just nickel and diming, you know, compared to the MRIs and things like that.
It's endless. You would talk like spine surgeries got whacked. And in fairness, I have friends that are spine surgeons, but there was a time when if you had back pain and you had any abnormality in MRI, you needed a spine surgery.
Yeah.
Why? And I want to oversimplify or generalize here, but here's my frustration. If insurance pays for it, you need it. Your doctor can say, you need a prostate biopsy. You need a knee replacement. You need a spine surgery. You need a skin biopsy. Why do you need it? And the cynical part of me says, because I can get paid for it. Guess what? Insurance doesn't pay for it? Nah, I don't really think you need that. You're not ready for that yet. I don't think you need this. And
then you have the insurance companies making the call on people's health instead of the person that's supposed to be doing it.
Absolutely. But even inherently, right? Because you're trying to make a living as a doctor. My heart goes out to doctors. I mean, this is I want to change the system in large part to help my physician colleagues and nurse practitioners have a better, at least in primary care. That's my thing. But it extends to specialty care, by the way, because good primary care leads to good specialty care. And I want to help them because if we can help the providers, their jobs, it's just gotten untenable to practice medicine, certainly in primary care, but most of my specialists, they're not happy either. It's just a fucking disaster right now. It's a horrible way to make a living. It's a great profession, but it's a terrible way to make a living. But if we can change that, make it better for the providers, then they are unshackled and they're able to take better care of their patients. And that's kind of the thought there. But when you have insurance companies that are making these decisions, or you have all these codes and policies that influence the way providers think about care, even good providers get caught up in that. And at the end of the day, good decisions are not made.
And you know, it's where I think I'm hopeful on, and it's actually, I'm seeing it, but the system that I'm a part of with my doctor now, those doctors are coming from general practices like a Hopkins system, like a hospital system. And just because I happen to ask the questions, but this puts a cap at 600 patients, which ends up translating to, I've had him for 2 years now, and I call him very infrequently, but anytime I do, even if it's for some random shit, he gets back to me that day, and there's no rushing. I could be on the phone with him for 5 minutes or 45 minutes, and it doesn't matter because it's like, no, I'm not concerned about it, you know, and then it's like, hey, you know what? You got time tomorrow? You want to swing by? It's been a couple months. Maybe we'll throw you on the table and just kind of give you a kind of once over. And so it's, when you get that time factor, which is what you said earlier, which is, you know, it fundamentally changes the game. And these guys appear to be financially like better off than they were in the old system. yeah, it cost money, which I wasn't used to paying, and I'm still not thrilled about that part. But but
I'm sorry.
the flip side is
this should be baked into the insurance. You shouldn't have to pay for primary care. Like, I think it's ridiculous that I have to charge patients for my services. I save insurance companies money. So
absolutely,
easily, yeah.
And I think we can. One of the conversations I'm involved in, we're trying to start a company to kind of scale this type of model, and it's a very fair question to ask. And what is the price point for primary care? I think I'm able to provide good primary care because of the time and the nature of the practice, and it sounds like, Matt, you're getting it as well. But as you reduce the amount of money to a primary care practice, because remember, there's overhead and staff, it's not cheap. I think there's a point at which you can drop that price, on a monthly basis, where it's accessible to most people, and you don't lose the effectiveness of the model. Like, I think I'm effective, but I'm overpriced, and I think a lot of us are overpriced relative to, let's say, an ROI in the marketplace. But okay, so what is it? Is it $200 a month? Is it $150 a month? $100? 50? 20? I can tell you it's more than 20. I can't run a good primary care practice on $20 a month.
Sure. No, of course not.
I need 2,000 patients. Now you're
losing quality.
Right. Now you're losing quality. Yeah.
$200 a month is probably too expensive. You should be able to do it less expensive than that. But what it does is, if you ask that question, you start optimizing, right? Well, how many staff members do I need? What's the best EMR? How do I do this efficiently, right? And those are the kinds of, that's where I'm hoping to see, if not drive, innovation in primary care models, because that's where I think we'll make the biggest difference.
So you dipped your toe into the water about the wearables and stuff. Like, we do live in a pretty amazing stretch of time here, right? Where we're really got a lot more access. Like, do you see sort of this N of one, can do it at my house thing contributing to this conversation in a meaningful way?
100%. Very meaningful. I think it's going to, I always like to say, it's going to 10x my effectiveness. It's not going to replace me, okay, but it's going to amplify what I can do. And why is that? So right now, I'll see my patients once a year. That's like my because I need to see you once a year. Like, I feel pretty good. I'm like, no, I need to see you. Why do I need to see you once a year? Because I need to know what's been going on in your life over the previous year. We call it the interval history, right?
Sure.
I need to understand if you're doing well. I'm like, why are you doing well? How and this is my time to understand the context in which you live your life, the environmental stressors you're subjected to, which tends to bucket either work-related stressors or home-related stressors.
Yeah.
There's other, stressors and toxins and pollution and water and food, nutrition. So I need to get an understanding of what's been going on. I call primary care the science of the in-between, responsible for what happens in between injuries and illnesses. Like, we're responsible for what's going on in between hospitalizations. And it's kind of, to a lot of people, it's white noise. So you're like, well, I'm fine. I don't need to see a doctor. I'm doing well. But there is so much information happening to you as me at a daily basis, at a minute basis, every second. What are we exposed to? What's happening? And it goes completely unrecognized and unknown. You're not even conscious of it, what you're necessarily subjected to. So why do I really like the wearables in particular? Because they can. We're not there yet. But they're going to be able to give me information about what's been going on with you and what's your physiological response been over the last
trends. Yeah.
And they don't lie, right? They're not going to be like, oh, no, I only had one glass of wine last night.
Exactly. Your heart rate variability.
You had 7.
No, my sleep is great. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Well, let's ask AI. It kind of looks like, I don't know, about once a week or so. Yeah, HRV is less than 10. What's going on?
What the hell's going on here? Yeah, we had a guy on the show that we're doing a project with. We could talk to you about it offline. You'd probably find it interesting, but he's dealing with this sort of wearable data, and then he's applying his 30 years of clinical experience that he's turning into an AI model. Yeah. And he's applying it, and he found just in one case study, he's got one all-star guinea pig right now. And they found out that if he ate 30 grams of protein past 7 p.m., his sleep score goes up 27%.
Wow.
Where on earth do you get that kind of fucking information? It's amazing. And 27%, by the way, is nothing to shake a stick at. That's a measurable.
It could be an extra 2 or 3 years at the end of your life, or it could be squaring off that curve where the quality of your life improves. So I'll tell you one thing: sleep is magic. I said early on in my story of 10 years of total utter collapse. A lot of that I think was related to sleep deprivation, and I think sleep is the greatest elixir. It's the greatest healer.
Yeah.
So, Bill, can I ask you this? Because I always felt like there was a bit of hazing in the Western medical system as far as, bringing in med students and asking them to make life or death decisions on 20-hour shifts and shit like that. I mean, do you think there's going to be any promise of that changing? Because that's a kind of a different system there. That's the education system on that side.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. The short answer is yes, it has changed. I was at the end of like old school medical training, like U.S. medical training, and hazing's fair. It's a fair word. I mean, particularly I think in some of the specialties, sleep meant you were weak. There was definitely a culture where you never said no, and it catered to driven people like us because I don't like to say no anyway. I don't say no to anything.
Yeah. Right.
So we it became this kind of cultural phenomenon that just drove everybody into the ground and created a lot of addicts and alcoholics.
It seems counterproductive or counterintuitive. By the way,
you're going to get worse outcomes if the person calling the shots is not on their game.
No doubt. So one of the things they did, I don't know how many years ago, they limited it. I love this. Limited it like legally to 80 hours a week. Like you were not legally allowed to work.
You can only work twice as much as everybody else.
But it's better than 120. I worked 136 hours one week. It was the first time in my life I actually said, how many hours are there in a week? I'm like 7 times 24, 168. I worked 136 of them. It was stupid. But so that has changed. And I think, and by and large, that's important. It did create another problem, by the way, and that is this transition of care. Because if you've been working, 30 straight hours, which is not uncommon if you're on call, and you have to leave at 8 a.m., you've been working on it. Like you're the only one that really has all the information about these 12 patients that you are deeply involved in. So if you just leave, those patients are in jeopardy in part because you weren't able to transfer the information. Yeah. So it has set up a whole series of, hospitalists and night shifts and care coordination and care transitions. And so it is moving in that direction. So the answer to your question is it absolutely is getting better. The training is getting better. And as we understand more about healthy behaviors overall, that is getting built into the medical education. So I'm optimistic that's going to get there.
Oh, good.
I mean, if I get less than 6 hours of sleep in a night and you ask me if I want like eggs or bacon, like I have no fucking idea the answer. I'm like, too much information. Like I can't, I can't even imagine doing that.
Everything.
My cousins have been trying to get me to go back to med school. I'm like, no. I've been doing acupuncture for 23 years. I have the doctor. No. He's like, if it's a money thing, Einstein College is giving away free med school. And then he literally pinged me when Hopkins started doing it. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
The residency will fucking kill me.
Yeah. Residency feels like something where your age starts with a 2.
That seems like prison
3.
camp.
Yeah.
Here's the problem, right? I mean, there's a lot of good, smart, young men and women who are like fuck medicine. I'm going to go into investment banking. I'm going to go into
why come out with the debt?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a whole other issue, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And then you come out, working 80 hours a week, making not enough to cover a mortgage and a debt repayment.
Bill's like, I hope my book does well. I still have a couple bucks left on my med school bills.
Oh, dude, I had to refinance. I'll pay my medical school debt off when I'm 65. I think
that is fucking bonkers. Are you serious?
No, I'm serious. Yeah.
Oh my fucking God.
Look, I know this brilliant. She's absolutely out of her mind, genius gynecologist. Her husband is a surgeon in an ER, and I'm not going to say which hospital. And she rolls up. We were working together at a chain of wellness centers in like a Dodge Caravan with like duct tape holding the shit together. Mm. And I'm like, look, I'm a broke ass acupuncturist. What the hell is your excuse? She goes, 3 kids in private school.
Oh my God.
Over $500,000 in student loan debt.
I mean,
like, how do you work your way out of that?
You don't. If you have husbands and wives, like couples that are both physicians, and again, particularly primary care, pediatrics, family medicine, like we are low people on the totem pole, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you can make money in medicine, and if you go into private practice and whatever, plastic surgery, neurosurgeons, no, they work their ass off. So I don't really have an issue with a cardiothoracic surgeon making $1 million a year.
No, I'm not arguing that either. Yeah,
not the issue. I'll focus on primary care only because who the hell wants to do primary care? It's just it's a thankless job. You deal with all this shit in the healthcare system. I call it the dumping ground of American medicine. When anything falls apart, call your primary care doctor. Nobody talks to us. Nobody communicates with us.
Right.
And you get all these the chronic diseases that we don't have solutions for. So you're asking me to fix somebody with tools that don't work. And you mentioned functional medicine before, which is why a lot of providers are either getting out of medicine altogether, or they're looking at these alternative, clinical models and trying to build into practice. What I did, I got certified in functional medicine. It's an amazing clinical model. I learned so much, really, nutrition, but just how all the nutrition and recovery, right, sleep and wellness and recovery, acupuncture, and all these other tools to actually reduce sympathetic overdrive. There's a concept, right?
Right, but just to pause you right there, just knowing that, right? That's the problem, right? And we've had this recursively on this show, right? Almost every guest we've ever had, I said, you know what? In order to be, if you're going to draw an archetype of a super healthy person who's got everything together, you have to know a lot about a lot of things, right? It's not just a casual understanding, sympathetic overload. I'll bet you if I walk down the street in my fairly affluent neighborhood, very educated, everyone here has got fucking at least one college degree. Most of them have multiple. Half the people here work at Hopkins, by the way. These are I'll bet how many of them would be able to give us an accurate definition of that? I'll bet you less than 30%. It's probably even lower.
Look, man, but on the same token, you ask everybody if they feel stressed out, they're like, yeah, that's just the way it is.
Correct.
It's normalized. That's the problem.
Yeah.
One of the big problems in our society is that stress or stressors is normalized and even culturally kind of condoned. I mean, how many times you guys will people brag about how little sleep they got?
That used to be the way.
I mean,
in Japan, they do have a clinical definition of work to death.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. This person worked to death.
Oh, wow.
And it makes absolute sense.
Oh, yeah. And there's a book called Dying for a Paycheck. Pretty cool. I mean, it makes a really compelling argument about work-related stress is the number one cause of chronic disease. Jeffrey Pfeffer, his name is. It was right on. I mean, when you look at, so it's not just limited to the medical system.
It's everywhere.
Everybody is working. My goal, Tom. My goal is I want parasympathetic overload. Is that possible?
Yeah. Is that possible? That's actually a good question.
I had an acupuncturist present that because a lot of stuff we're doing, if we look at it from a Western standpoint, is regulating that balance. And they were talking a lot about weird connective tissue diseases in those rare cases where somebody is hyper parasympathetic, if that's the right term.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded so weird. And he's like, no, but if you think about it, everything's just loose.
Yep.
Everything, you don't get triggered. You don't get upset. You're just kind of, ugh. Yep. And I'm like, are you sure that's not adrenal burnout?
Yeah, right.
Are you just not making cortisol anymore?
Yeah, people like you're super relaxed, like something's wrong. But I think we've also this laziness factor. It's like, oh, if I don't work my ass off, I'm lazy. I fell into that trap. We all know Doug Brackman for the same reason. Oh my God,
you mentioned Driven,
yep.
And I remember telling him once, I'm like, oh man, I'm so lazy. I took a nap the other day. He's like, you were tired and you laid down and you feel bad about it. He goes, somebody that's lazy will not get off the couch for 3 days and think nothing of it. You're beating yourself up for a 2-hour nap.
Yeah, Doug is amazing. He's the first guy. And I've had, I can't count the number of therapists I've had over the years. Doug was honestly the first guy who got me. Who I thought, I'm like, within the first time on shift, I'm like, you get me. Like you really understand what goes on. Between my ears. And he's a spectacular guy. That book, and I've given that book out to a lot.
Oh my God!
Yeah, that book's great.
I'll tell you this, and I probably told you this, kind of, Bill, once or twice somewhere. But I was reading his intro, my wife is sitting next to me. We're on the couch. The TV's on. I got my phone out, and he's got one paragraph, and he says, "If you're driven, you're probably sitting next to your spouse right now." and like I started crying, and my wife is like, "What's the matter with you?" Because she's like, "Why? How can you do that?" And I'm like, This paragraph right here.
Yeah. If you want the user,
he's got me.
Yeah. If you want the user manual for me, here it is. Just read this book.
Highlight this right here and hand it to you.
I'm going to tell you something that Doug taught me, and it's been a game changer. And I actually use it in the recovery community because most people suffer from addiction are driven. Like there's such an overlap.
I was going to say
personality,
they have
addiction, to be. ADHD, right? And it's this idea that, and I do believe we're wired genetically differently, right? I mean, I talk about genetic variants in my book.
You told me you checked out those 2 SNPs, right?
Yeah. So yeah, the dopamine, the DR2 receptors. Yeah. And listen, I'm a hypermetabolizer of dopamine, right? On one hand, and I've got, receptor variants that basically, make it a little bit hard for dopamine to kind of lock into that receptor. So it's like a double whammy. I need more dopamine at a time when I metabolize and get rid of more dopamine. So
and it doesn't last.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Reward deficiency syndrome. And you kind of run into this low dopamine state and you're like, this kind of sucks. Like I'm just like sitting here and like have no motivation and I'm flat. But you want that dopamine hit. So what do? You seek pleasure. You seek excitement. You seek that because you want it. Which dopamine really is, they say it's the pleasure chemical. It's really the seeking chemical, right? It makes us kind of search. But here's the thing, and Doug taught me this, and a woman, Anna Lemke, she wrote a book, Dopamine Nation. It's another good one. That we are our genotype, right? And it probably is maybe 15% of the population, maybe 20. We're wired, genetically optimized for a severe environment, a resource scarce environment. We're wired to pursue, to seek, to find. So, 30, 50, 100,000 years ago, we were the crazy motherfuckers who were like, we're running out of food. I'm like, hey, I'll go. I'm like, hey, anybody want to go out for a week and look for food and water? Like, you guys would be in. Like, we know the driven tribe. Like, we know who would be in. Other people are like, I'm going to stay home. I'm like, that's cool because there's stuff that you need to do. Anyway, it's not a better or worse. But the point is, like, yeah, we would have gone out and we would have not come back until we had food, water, firewood, shelter. Like we would have come back with all this stuff.
Or we died trying.
Or we died trying. Yeah.
Or we died trying.
And Doug said it's like it's not just. And actually, the thing I took away from him was he said it's not just the willingness to go to see what's on the other side of the hill. It's a compulsion to go to the other side of the hill. I go to the other side.
Yeah. There's something over there, man.
Yeah.
I remember saying, "Hey, man, I'm just a normal guy," and he goes, "No, you're not normal.
They don't do that.
You're not normal." He goes, "You want to see normal?" And I'm like, "I'm so afraid of what you're going to tell me." He goes, "Go stand in line at Disney World."
Yeah.
It is. It is. It's
he said, go to any Walmart in America.
At Walmart, and then he mentioned Walmart. I'm like, Doug, I fucking hate Walmart. Yeah. He's like, yeah, you do.
We would have been the superheroes back then, and people like me, and I think a lot of us, we love affirmation, right? Particularly men, like we need that. Being honest, but we would have had all that, right? We would have come back, to a parade. We would have saved our tribe, and we would have been affirmed, right? And women would have loved us, and the kids would have been superheroes. And now we're like outcasts, honestly, because we're kind of the minority, and people look at us like we're fucking crazy. Because we don't do well. I don't do well in a world of abundance. It kind of have a difficult time regulating all that stuff. So it's just we're just wired for a different world. That's all.
I'll see you that, and I'll raise you. Like when I do have abundance, I like kind of create scarcity. You know what I mean? Like it's like a weird backwards thing. You're like.
I had somebody on my staff say that to me, where I'm like, "Yeah, things are pretty good." She's like, "Are you going to blow something up now?"
Yeah,
it's like probably. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I don't do well with it because I get bored easily. So I create the chaos. If I blow it up, I'm like, yeah, my wife will do that. Like, what are you doing now? I'm like, I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z. Like, why? I'm like, because I can. I don't know. Because it's like, why would I not do that?
Just this is too calm for me.
Yeah, I'm bored.
Well, it's funny when I first got into exercise, when I made the transition from smoking a pack and a half a day to not. I was like, I did that by biking, right? Like that was my entree to it. And it is funny when you go up the food chain of exercise intensity, like when you're doing a bike ride, at a century level, even you get a bunch of like middle-aged white guys usually on expensive bikes that are just out for a casual ride. They're eating like a Cliff Bar and like it's, they shop at Whole Foods and, they're normal-ish people. Then you get into marathons and you're like, all right, I could ratchet this up. I'm going to go do a marathon now. And then you see like a different kind of person, right? Like, yeah, there's still some Whole Fooders here, but these people are like vegan or carnivore or, paleo. Like there's like an intensity uptick, right? Then I got into Ironman and it's like all bets are off. These are all recovering alcoholics. They're all drug addicts. They're all fucking crazy driven, like monsters. They're not even like
David Goggins type. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. You're just now all of a sudden you're in like a whole different level and they have totally normalized this, by the way. So when you talk about finding a driven tribe, you get into those things. But it was always funny. Like I told somebody one time, and the reason I'm bringing this up is somebody said, I said, oh, I just did my 5th Ironman. And they're like, oh, how long have you been in recovery? And I was like, well, that's a weird question. I was like,
fair question though.
It's a fair question, but I had never thought of it like that before. Yeah. And they were like, and when I look at when you look at like Kelly Starrett or any of these guys who are like, what's the guy who did CrossFit endurance, with the tattoos on it all over his hands and everything. God, I can't remember his name, but anyway, these guys are all like hardcore, intense dudes that have like a not so pristine past. Mm-hmm. And now Andrew Huberman, we're finding out about this guy who's like a fucking rock star in the world. But you find out he was like an alcoholic skate rat, doing all this crazy shit. And I'm like, what is it about it? High functioning, like you said, that trait goes everywhere, right? It doesn't matter if you're blowing lines of Ritalin or running your 15th Ironman in the month. Like you still get driven by that. But like, if it wasn't for those people, like you said, we're outcasts, but all those people are shaping the future of this conversation.
Well,
right?
That's it. They're the explorers.
Yeah. They're like, I've done all the drugs.
We're crazy, creative, right? Creative, tenacious, determined. Like, you're right. Like, we don't stop until either we die or we solve the problem. And, it's like a dog on a meat truck. You can't pull them off, right?
And then we're not happy when we solve the problem.
Well, then you solve the problem because you get to the top of the flagpole and you're like,
oh, that was great. What's next?
Yeah. Well, the good news about being alive is there's never an end to the problems, right? It's like there's always going to be a problem to solve, right? I mean, that's never going to.
Right.
No one's ever going to be in danger of having no more problems to solve, right? It's,
but no, I think it does speak to the benefits and the assets, and because a lot of us in this community, and again, you don't have to be a declared addict, like again going to the rooms of either AA or NA to be struggling. And one of the things that I really would like to do is bring a lot of these tools into primary care, because again, everybody struggles. Like, I don't care who you are. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care what your situation is. The more you think you don't struggle, actually, probably the more you really are internally. It's called humanity, right? It's just human. But I think if we talk about healing, right, Tom, and I love this word, and I love thinking about what is it to heal? What does that mean? What does the healing process really entail? And you have a perspective on this, because us in Western medicine, the best you're going to talk about is like tissue healing. Oh yeah, you got to cut yourself, and it is kind of magical when you think about like a skin cut. It's magic.
I always get so crazy about that, because even just the cascade of like clotting factors is so stupidly complex. Yeah. And then you have protein chains coming and stitching the skin back together.
Mind-boggling.
Like the fact that we even exist is like, what is the fucking, why would we make it this complicated? Isn't nothingness easier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is funny.
But then you talk about emotional healing, right? And trauma.
Yeah.
Psychological, that. But it's the same process of, to some extent, kind of injury, disrupted architecture, and then reconstruction of that architecture. And I think there's and not to get all esoteric here, but it does apply some meaning to suffering. I think, Matt, you said, and I said this in my book, that kind of the greater the adversity, the greater the opportunity for growth. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be some truth that the biggest lessons I learned and the most impactful experiences I had were not positive, right? I mean, I learned from the depth of hell, and that has kind of formed me. And I think it's this constant. I talk about kind of cycles, and actually, I'm reading a book now. It's an old book called The Fourth Turning. You guys familiar with that?
I've heard the title. Yeah.
Oh my God, blow your mind. Let's just read chapter 1. It's insane. But it's this cyclical nature of everything, right? It's not even just humans, right? It's systems more broadly, whether it's at a molecular level or a galactic level, it doesn't matter. These are all systems that operate and behave in very predictable cyclical fashions. And it's not surprising. It's like the seasons, right? Spring, everything grows, and summertime, everything's kind of like this, adaptation, recreational activity. And then fall comes, things start falling apart. And then winter comes, everything falls apart. And then
he's talking Chinese medicine now, Matt, by the way.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, Tom will bring it all back to Chinese
seasonal
medicine.
changes.
Oh. Yeah.
Look, man, you can't escape the laws of nature, right?
No,
and I mean, we're really advanced primates, but we're still primates.
Well, funny, I had this epiphany in 2011, right? I talk about it in my book. It was a very cool epiphany. I wrote about it in my book, and it was very impactful about how complex systems kind of operate in this fashion, right? Structure and function kind of co-adapting with each other over time. It's very cool, and then of course I come up with this thing. I'm like, yeah, this is how my life was, right? The whole collapse and rebuild, right? I experienced that. And then again, never since then, I'm like, oh yeah, they were talking about that 3,000 years ago. Oh yeah, like this has been going on forever. Because why? It's almost a universal truth, but we don't appreciate it, right? For 350 years, we've been like Newtonian physics taught us like, hey, everything's like reduction. We can reduce it down to the parts. We can linearize any problem. Like we kind of forgot that that's not really the way the universe works. It operates a little bit differently. So I think we need to go back to some of the ways that people looked at things before.
Yeah, I mean, I've been studying martial arts for 20 something years, and one of the things that it's like if I could distill it down to one lesson for people when I have a conversation, because I know they don't want to hear 20 years of stories. There's 206 bones in the body, and they all break the exact same fucking way. So so you could invent all kinds of ways to do that, and you could put different labels on it, but if you bend your elbow one way, it bends, and if you bend it the other way, it breaks. That's just not more complicated than that. So and so to your point, there really isn't anything new under the sun. Somebody else told me something that blew my mind. They're like, that the same shit exists on Earth now as in the dinosaurs, but now we're sending satellites to the outer limits of the solar system, and back then we had dinosaurs. But like nothing new has happened, right? Like we haven't had like a new element hit the ground. Like nothing has changed. We have had the same ingredients forever. And in 1,000 years from now, wherever we are, if we are, like the same story will be true, right?
All that stuff still existed somehow.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we aren't inventing we're literally not inventing new materials. We're just sort of figuring different ways to put it together, but
reorganizing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Reorganizing. Yeah. But that's the part, like, when you look at, you actually said it earlier, back then when this insurance was born, people moved around a lot. Generally, they were healthy. The fat people were usually the rich people, right? Like, and that was sort of like a different thing. I have to force my dumb ass to get up 3 to 5 times a day and do a lap around my neighborhood, because like otherwise I was sitting at my desk for 12 hours.
12 hours, yeah.
And now I have to go through the list of shit I have to do, Bill, just to stay functional every day is retarded. Like I have to do meditation. I have to do stretching. I have to do PMF. I have to do infrared sauna. I have to do walking. I have to do stretching. And that's just so that I don't actually crumble.
Matt's daily recovery list will be available on our website. Right. Check the affiliate links for all the products.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely mind-boggling how many things I have to do to just not fall apart.
Yeah. Right. And we did naturally 30,000 years ago. Nobody exercised because you exercised.
Yeah, you were outside. You were moving around. Yeah.
It's just part of nature. It's very different. And, I think we need to understand that, acknowledge it. And we need, again, this kind of idea, we need a healthcare system to help people kind of get back to what healthy living really entails, because we've just gone off the rails, absolutely gone off the rails. And, is it any surprise we have $4 trillion worth of chronic disease every year? It's not really surprising. But I think we had to get back to some roots. And, Tom, I think, Eastern philosophy has a lot to add to this. Mm-hmm. My Western medicine colleagues don't like the word holistic, right? Because they think it's quackery. But you start to see versions of it, right? So functional medicine, they're getting a bit beat up from the conventional medicine colleagues. I was warned, like, hey, you should be careful about that functional medicine brand. Like, you're a Hopkins doctor.
Yeah, but it's so funny because it does have roots in East Asian medicine.
Yeah.
And if we look at East Asian medicine on PubMed, man, it's more studied than any other goddamn thing. And the initial studies were an attempt to discredit it. And they're like, no, this is actually doing what they said it is. Maybe not the way they said it, but.
Well, it's funny. If you look at like Medicaid managed care or the VA, the term now is whole person care. I'm like, it's like you mean holistic care? It's like, okay, so you're rebranding it, and maybe that's fine. At least they're oriented towards human beings as complex biological systems, right? More than the sum of the parts. But also, it's not just about you or me. We live in a community. We live in a community of other people, and we live in an environment that we exchange energy with. So if you don't understand that, you don't take that into account, you're just missing a large part of the equation.
Well, that's been my problem with the rugged individualism a little bit, because it's not like, look, you want to go out and live in the woods, great, but like just understand that you're getting to the woods in the car that somebody else built. Somebody else made that shovel. I don't think you smelted that iron.
Yeah.
And it's not. There's nothing wrong with it, but like we're a community of people, whether or not we want to be.
That's how we survive.
We're
1,000 humans. There was like a minimum number. I think it was like 150. You get less than 150, you die. You can't survive. And part of that is because of diversity of skill sets. This is the beauty of genetic variation, by the way. The reason we have so much genetic variation is everybody has a skill set. Like, I'm good at things that my wife's not good at. She's certainly good at things that I suck at. But together we make a great team. You put a whole group together, a community, a tribe, then everybody's is good at something. And, we do well to get back to that way of thinking.
There was a psychologist that I heard talk about unboxing videos and why they're so viral.
God, I hate those damn things.
And reaction videos and stuff. And it was fascinating because she was like, well, in a pre-social media, pre-cell phone, pre-technology world, you got to share that experience with people. Like you had somebody open a box. You had somebody be surprised by a loved one coming home from war. You had you had it. It was in your life. It was in your neighbor's life. It was in your family's life, right? And now nobody does anything with anybody. And all those human connections are being systemically removed.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the DNA requirement that you have to do it. Like your body's still looking for that.
Yeah.
So now people are like endlessly watching reaction videos, even if they're staged, even if it's staged, right? Mm-hmm. Like my wife watched one the other day and like this woman walked in the door with a phone, like to video her dog's reaction. And I'm like, okay, but who walks in their fucking door with a cell phone going? I mean, this is
one where the doctor lost a patient and they literally set up the phone, came in the door, pulled the mask off, did the whole, and then shrunk. And I'm like, she put the fucking phone up.
Yeah.
She set this entire thing up and everyone's like, oh my God, it's so rough for them. And it's like, she staged this whole fucking thing.
But it doesn't change the fact that people want to keep watching it, right? Like they in the face of knowing it's absolutely bullshit, they're like, nope, I'm going to watch 8 more of these right now. Like, I'm just kidding.
And this is why reality TV happened.
Yeah. But it's fascinating because if we don't go back to our roots, right, which our roots are touch another human, be next to another human, converse with another human, like be in caucus with other humans, right? Like that is a thing. If you don't have it, you need it. You're going to get it somehow. But like, that's one of those lessons. Like I laughed, Tom, and I think you and I laughed about this. We're like, what's going to happen in 5 years is it's going to be like cool to get together in person. And that's going to be the new biohack, right? It's going to be like, there's 20 of us getting together for a health,
what we're going to do? We're going to drink wine, maybe eat dinner. I don't know. You're going to have a dinner party?
Yeah.
What?
Right.
Together in person.
Yeah.
I when I was writing my book, I was trying to break down like different types of exercise, and I was going through physical exercise and my approach, right? Mobility and low intensity aerobics, high intensity aerobics, strength training, all that stuff. And they're like, well, but then there's cognitive exercise, right? Which is important for good cognitive function and a lot of good data on all that stuff. And I'm like, what about social exercises? Because social activity is important. Do we ever like intentionally teach people how to socialize? And no, I think the answer is no, I mean, but maybe we should, maybe we should be building in programs. I mean, now I'd say, this is something again in recovery, because we have a recovery community and we're very tight. And part of the reason why 12-step programs work is because of the network, right?
Correct.
It's because you realize, hey, I've been alone in my basement with, drugs and alcohol, and like sitting there like, that's bad, but being in community, being connected with other people in recovery, working a program, it's that connection that is really what's healing, in my experience.
Yeah, and without it, and that's the part that I know I've got younger kids, but that's one of the big things that I've noticed with my kids is like, and whether this ends up being like an epigenetic societal change that ends up being okay, or if it just is not okay, we don't know yet, but I can't imagine it's going good. But like, these people don't, like my son and his friends, they don't have the same kind of interpersonal communication. We had like 10 kids at my house the other day, right? And 5 of them or 6 of them wanted to go out to Royal Farms and grab snacks, and the other couple didn't. There wasn't really like you and I, if we were kids, right? We'd be like, oh man, I want to go over here. And you're like, nah, I don't really feel like it. Come on, get off the couch, dude. Come on. There would have been like something. These guys, there was nothing. It was just like the ones that wanted to leave got up and left, and then they never came back. Like that was the end of the socializing, because there was no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know that no one's dying here. This isn't the end of the world. But like, it was so fascinating to watch, because 10, 20 years ago when I was doing that, would have been totally different.
Oh, you would have given your friends hell for not wanting to let go.
Yeah.
Come on, man. What's the matter with you?
But we probably wouldn't have broken up, right? Like the group.
No, you would have kept the group together. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And at a minimum, we might have sent one person out on a recon and come back or something. Like there would have been a different thing, but we wouldn't have like broken the party up had it. You know what I mean?
You would have problem solved. We would have figured it out. Hey, you're going to do this. We're going to stay here. You can do that. And everybody comes back together. You at least would have talked about it. Come up with a plan. Right. The plan and come back. Yeah.
And that's the part where I'm like, it's not a straight line, because, you can't just say, okay, well, social media is bad because of X, Y, and Z. Like it's those soft problems, right? Like that dissolution of those human bonds that like that part. And you know what you said about that? I forget what they call that number, by the way. I keep wanting to say Dunbar number, but that's the wrong one. But that 150. But like, it is interesting when you look at human clans.
What a tribe would be. Yeah.
At a certain point, because like you just simply don't have the bandwidth to cover all the required pieces, right?
Yeah.
You just can't keep it together.
And, think about like if you were exiled in terms of, behavior, it was kind of auto-regulated, right? Because if you didn't conform in some capacity, if you're just an ass and you got booted, you died. Like if you died,
my mentor used to tell me that story all the time. He's like, look, if you were, there was a tribe, they point a bone at you, you're out, you're dead within 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter. You got eaten by a lion or you fell off a cliff.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, but now exiled, you're like, oh, you mean I could go hang out by myself and doom scroll TikTok for all day? Cool.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, great.
Great. I want to catch up on this restoration video.
Yeah. I got plenty of dog videos to watch. Yeah. Bill, listen, man, I honestly could talk to you all month.
Yeah. This is awesome. I love it. I'm gonna
have to put a pin in this at some point, right?
And Tom, I need to come down and see you, brother. It's been a while.
Man. I know. We'll grab lunch. We'll throw you in the cryo. We'll give you a treatment.
Yeah.
All right. I'll pick you up on that. I will do it.
Totally.
Yeah, and maybe we need to have Brian in town so we could all get in his little Airstream and check out that.
I didn't think that was in the state.
I think he's got multiples now, but yeah, Bill, I don't know if you've talked to Brian in a while, but he's got this crazy chair. It's
really?
It's awesome. Huh?
Has he cloned himself yet?
No, he's getting closer though.
This chair's pretty close.
This chair's definitely close, man. I tell you what, it's got its own private Airstream as its transport device. It's
EMF field, haptic sound, binaural beats, hydrogen gas.
Yeah, it's wild.
Red light therapy. I know I'm missing a couple other things. Guided meditation.
Yeah, the guy who did the soundtrack lives in a pyramid in Tibet or something. Wow. Yeah,
there's a didgeridoo involved.
There's a didgeridoo involved. Yeah, as long as you have a didgeridoo, it's all pretty legit.
That's cool. Yeah, all right, let's make it happen.
Cool, Bill. Thanks again. So let's talk about the book real quick. Let's.
I'll throw that up one more time there.
Yeah, it's a lot of the stuff we talked about, honestly. It's just, it was a cool experience. And thank Joe McClinsky for putting that bug in my ear. 3 years later, you got a book. That was the hardest thing I ever did. But it really, it was fun. It was impactful. So I appreciate the plug.
He's got his book coming out, his next one coming out right now too.
Well, that's his third or his fourth, right?
Yeah, it's his third, I think. So yeah, it's funny. Everyone's writing books. Tom's got one. I'm the only one who doesn't have a book. I got to talk about driven, keeping up with the pack. I got to get a book out.
You got to get a book out there.
Yes.
Got to get a book out.
Got to do it. Cool, guys. Well, listen, enjoy the weekend, and thanks again, Bill.
Awesome time, Bill. Thank you so much.
Great to see you guys.
Take care.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.